Hi there. Welcome to Bible/Chat. Kevin, hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm excellent.
Good.
We have a couple things. One quick announcement before we jump into today's topic.
Announcements?
Yes, I know. We
Nice.
don't do announcements, but
Cool.
we're doing an announcement.
Sweet.
The guy who publishes these asked us to let everyone know we're going to start releasing them on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays.
Sweet.
So 3 a week.
Expectations.
Yeah, and once in a while we'll stick in some others. We have like 300 and something episodes, but they've kind of been released in like random order.
Cool.
So we're gonna try to do like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then maybe throw in a few extras
Nice.
on a Tuesday or Thursday from time to time. So that's where we're headed from now on, with a little bit of a schedule.
Cool.
It's always nice to be scheduled. So we have a question. We're going to continue our dating series.
Cool.
So here's the question that I want to ask, and hopefully this is helpful. We've talked about what to look for, like in terms of criteria for a spouse. You know, looking around for a spouse. Here's the 3 biblical criteria, and you got the providence of God one. If we just take that providence of God one and kind of pull it back just a little bit, if you're thinking about a person who's single and they're thinking to themselves, I'm a Christian, I love God, I know Him, I'd like to be in a relationship with another Christian. Where am I going to find another Christian to date?
Yeah.
Which opens a ton of cans, and one of those cans is the online dating world.
Yeah.
So my question for you is, maybe unpack our thoughts or your thoughts on the online dating world. We can bounce back and forth on this.
Sure.
We haven't really discussed it prior to recording this.
Yeah,
so.
this is fun.
So go ahead.
Yeah. So I think, in general, it exists for a reason. I mean, the connection that's necessary sometimes takes place like over a wide geographical range and things. To where one of my friends just recently got married in basically the American South, and he was driving 2 hours north for a date and an hour south for a date or whatever. He was considering people because that platform made the world smaller in that sense. Which is fine. I mean, there's nothing inherently wrong with it. It's a tool.
Yeah. And in one sense, it's super helpful.
Yeah.
If you think about like how many conservative, biblical, Christians there are with some relatively similar theology, there's not that many.
Exactly.
And most of these churches are small churches. So you're really looking at you're trying to widen that pool and say, okay, who else is out there that has similar convictions as me?
Exactly. I think that tool, that platform, it exists for a reason, a good reason, is to connect people of like convictions. Just from example, I mean, the first care group I was in, it was like probably 4 or 5 couples met online. And so it's it's awesome.
Yeah.
And
godly couples love each other,
like just great people. And so I love that.
Being fruitful and multiplying.
Yeah. I mean, that's sweet. I mean, to see that. So I don't have anything against it. I think there's cautions when it comes to how to practically use it. Especially if you're like a lady. But yeah, I think in general it's fair game.
Okay.
So.
Good. So let's real quickly just unpack maybe those cautions, maybe for a lady and a guy.
For sure.
What's kind of the cautionary tale when it comes to online dating? Maybe we could talk even specifically about some practical helps with that. But where would your cautions lie?
I mean, there's so many things.
I
guess like for guys, I think one of the things is just the temptations of going based on looks. Just like in a heart temptation sense, of just like profiling people on paper. And I get it, they have to like make a profile and stuff, but just like the superficiality of what you can go off of based on that. So you don't really know a person based on what they put online, and that's part of the caution with the ladies too. People hijack these things. I mean, that's a reality. They use them for illicit purposes. But I think for the guys, I'd say that'd be one of the main things. I'm not, I didn't use these platforms, so I don't speak from experience on all of that. But I can just see just based on online platforms and how they present people, it's not the same as knowing someone, seeing them function in the context of your church and all that. So just being cautious with what you're basing your decisions off of.
Totally.
I think for the ladies, the same. For sure, it's same heart, but also like a huge safety, security. I mean, that's just there are so many stories, and for guys too, actually. I mean, there's a real life story of a guy who was going to meet some gal, and turned out basically the guy, it wasn't a girl, it was a serial killer, basically.
Oh, yeah.
And that was famous in Hollywood a while back. And so just realizing like there's some sinful people out there,
Yeah.
and if the access door to these platforms is big, and they're like, I don't know how they would restrict it, but these can be co-opted, so
totally.
super dangerous in that sense. So definitely safer to live, in your own ecosystem,
Yeah.
or to work in groups or something like that. But I mean, this is just really, really
Or stay in
serious.
very public places. Like,
Yes,
don't go on
yes,
your own. Yeah.
for sure. So would you add anything to that?
I think that's super helpful. I think that's just like general safety precaution, even if it's someone who you've just recently met. I mean, even if you didn't meet them on an online platform, just be wise. Stay in public places. Be with people you know. Don't go into private areas for guys and girls. I think the other thing too. I mean, maybe just like, let's say you do meet someone, they do seem to be someone who you might like to get to know better. I mean, I would just encourage that person to be very slow in allowing their heart to move in a certain direction. I think, like you said, you can present yourself online in certain ways, and you can carry on a facade of who you are. You want to get to know them very specifically if you're going to like let your heart move forward. And so you really do have to restrict your heart and just get to know that person. And when you don't see them interact in a church context, it's much harder to actually know who they really are. So you want to observe them and take time to do that in such a way that you're aware of who they really are.
Yes, for sure.
Which might include reaching out to their church leaders and finding out where they're at in terms of their participation and influence in the church. Then bringing them to your church so people who are in your church can help observe them. So all those things to help with that, because the temptation is like just basically judging based on looks, judging based on what seems like, oh, he seems like a great guy. All of that is like very dangerous. So those are just ways to open the door. And that's okay to open the door, but then once you're in the door, and once the door's open, then like be real slow in making those evaluations.
That's so good. I think to couch it in a church context, especially, if it's someone like in our church, a more theologically conservative church, gospel-centered church, it's like we would hopefully be looking for someone who's in that position, which is why it's actually really safe, for Christians to be kind of deferring to church leaders in that sense, where it's like, fold those guys in, right? I mean, there's a lot there where there's a lot of safety under the shepherding of godly guys. So
totally.
That's huge.
That's a helpful thing. And then, and then in terms of, I had one more question. Back to the whole thing about like just judging on the basis of externals. What would you say to someone who maybe is in a church, and there are people who are opposite gender in the church, and you're like, well, I'm not really like physically attracted to that person. What would you give them any advice on that, or would you just say like, okay, well that's a rule out then?
I mean, I think like you mentioned the criteria of like being attracted to them, but I think with that conversation too, to get back into like, what are you looking for? Like, what's your metric of attraction? You know, just like just to take it as not a given. Like there are things where, maybe someone's like, I have to date someone with red hair, and it's like, because that's attractive to me. It's like, well, I mean, it's not wrong, right? But like, God makes red hair people, but like, I don't know. There's things like that where you might be making some petty thing, like green eyes, like as something more important than actually a marriage, and totally. So definitely like ranking that physical attraction underneath like spiritual Christ-likeness, which makes somebody attractive.
Totally.
And so, I would probably first move would be kind of to order those rightly rather than make that the dominating factor. Yeah,
which is a helpful like suggestion, just to get those things ordered rightly. And then one other thing, so as a side note to that, when it comes to making a profile, just in terms of wisdom about how to make an online profile. Any thoughts that you'd suggest on that?
I might.
I mean, obviously you never did this.
I haven't thought of it. I haven't thought of it, but it's funny just to think of it as like a creative exercise, to be recorded for all time. But
you'll be fine.
It's funny how like biblical, like Paul profiles himself. Think about like what the Bible does to present somebody.
Totally.
It's like he's like, I'm a horrible sinner, and Christ is awesome. And like, if I saw that humility in somebody who's not like flexing and trying to be like super, I'm perfect and don't look at any blemishes because I don't have them. Like just to be like blood honest about the greatness of Jesus and your great sinfulness and the ways he sanctified you, and not just to speak in Christianese either, though.
Yeah,
like just
totally.
to hide in biblical words, because that's not necessarily honest. And so, yeah, I think, of course, being honest is the main thing, but being humble, because the whole temptation is just a posture.
Yeah, totally. The danger of that is immense, right? That's just super tricky.
Yeah.
So in that case, so putting things forward that would include humility and an apparent submission to the word are like helpful ways to kind of put yourself forward and say like, hey, this is the kind of person I'm looking for as well. So in one sense, you are like sort of like expressing who you are and then who you're looking for at the same time, things that interest you.
Yeah, the more you're spiritually mature, the more you have to say that's actually helpful for people, rather than like, I love, this band, or whatever. But like, no, I value God's purposes in the local church, and I'm trying to serve and be submitted to my elders, and, and serve in these ways and all this stuff. And it's like, that's awesome. I mean, the more mature you are in those spheres, it's like, those are the things you want to hold up Christ likeness in that way. And yeah, I mean, that's great. So rather than just like thinking, what would a Christian want to hear? And then just like faking it, actually showing like, this humility is my heart, like this is my honest, humble desire that like Christ gave me, and just to give some context to it of like, this is what you're gonna get. Like it's someone who wants to be plugged into their church and submitted to God's word and all that. It's like all those things are music.
So. Totally. That's super helpful. So, like, summarizing this conversation, not necessarily a bad thing. It's a good thing. Helpful way to broaden that pool. Meet people who you wouldn't meet otherwise. Meet conservative people who maybe are fewer and further between in today's church environment. But then also just some caveats of wisdom, ways to protect yourself, ways to protect yourself both spiritually and physically. And so just approach it with wisdom, the way you would any other way of addressing a pool.
Now, again, not to live by your feels, get caught up in passions, and not to lose your head. So
that's awesome.
Helpful.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's super helpful. Well, we hope that's helpful for you. We know this is a complex topic, but again, we're thankful for you, and hopefully this is helpful for you. If you have any questions on this or any other topic, you can always email us at info@faithbibleoc.org. Thanks so much.